Welcome everybody to the window into COP23 live from Bonn, Germany. Thanks for joining us to get an inside look at this historic event. Looks like we have someone from Wabasha, Minnesota tuning in. She says she's here with her high school Earth's climate class and able to join us until 12:20, so that's great. We have Aurora Conley with us today, who actually is in Bonn, Germany, and she's going to share a little bit about her experience, what it has been at COP23. But my name is Megan Van Lowe, and I work at Climate Generation, a Will Steger legacy. And we are a nonprofit in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we empower individuals and their communities to engage in solutions to climate. So that is our mission. We work with youth, educators, the public, and influentials to engage them in the solutions. So we have had a history of sending delegations to these international negotiations. We, in 2009, actually sent a delegation to Copenhagen, which actually Aurora was part of as a youth at that time. And she was part of a cohort of other youth from across the Midwest who engaged in the negotiations. We also sent a group to Paris in 2015 for COP21, and that was a group of teachers from across the country to engage as both learners and communicators back to their communities. So this year for COP23, we have sent a multi-sector delegation from Minnesota. You can see those in the photo there. And so there's 9 of them who represent all sectors that we have across the board here in Minnesota, because we recognize that it takes everyone to address climate change, and that all voices must be present and represented at the decision-making table. So we have people from education, from law, philanthropy, youth, elected officials, and Indigenous communities to show the world that we are still in. So COP23 this year is bringing together nations of the world to continue their work on strengthening the global response to the threat of climate change. And now that American cities, states, businesses, and citizens are taking on the US climate leadership, we know we need a strong subnational presence to show that we are still in, even though at the federal level they said we are out. So our delegation of Minnesota and Minnesotans joins the greater US Peoples delegation, which includes other NGOs and elected officials from around the country. So I'm excited to introduce to you Aurora Conley. She is Anishinaabe from the Bad River tribe on Lake Superior in Wisconsin, and lives there with her 2 sons, Misko and Jordan. She's worked for the tribe's legal department since 2012 as the litigation support specialist. She chairs the Anishinaabe Environmental Protection Alliance, focusing on protection and preservation of land and water. Aurora was a delegate, like I said, in our 2009 expedition, Copenhagen, and COP15, and a delegate to COP16 in Cancun, Mexico. She worked for Honor the Earth as executive assistant for a number of years. And she recently was an international observer serving El Salvador and Guatemala. Aurora addresses many community issues and connects them to the larger world, such as poverty, education, public health, and resiliency. She also serves the community as a first responder and co-coordinates a harm reduction needle exchange. She loves living on the Gitche Gumi, the big water, with her family, and hopes to one day write a book, travel, and make art. So if you guys have any questions, looks like we have a classroom joining us. Feel free to chat them in the chat box and we can address them as we go, but I'm gonna turn it over to Aurora.
Thank you. Well, that was quite the introduction. I don't feel like I have to introduce myself, but it is just proper. My name is Aurora. I'm from Bad River. Very proud to be there and very proud to be living at home and being able to work on so many of the issues that we face, whether it's a climate issue or a social issue, because we have a plethora. as many communities do, and that's what makes focusing on climate change that much more difficult sometimes, because we have so many other issues that are happening. It's really difficult to focus on something that a lot of folks don't feel is tangible, or maybe that they're not seeing the direct effects, which when I went to the first COP with the former Will Steger Foundation, it was really, it appeared to be a little difficult to make those connections, but having the foresight of knowing that eventually a majority of communities, countries, and whatnot are always connected, and that eventually we will be affected in some way, shape, or form, because it always comes in a different way as well. So with that, I just wanted to go through a little bit. I was just going to be sharing some photos and then kind of guiding the talk through that and just the experiences here. So I'll start to share my screen, and hopefully I can move that. So I got here Sunday morning, quite early, and made way into the city. I took a 2-hour train from Frankfurt, and I wrote some of that in the first day blog. And then I was really grateful that I was able to navigate the entire conference, because it's a lot, and it's very huge, and it can be very confusing. And if you don't have a basic understanding of the frameworks, it can be very difficult to navigate, and not just for citizens or observers such as myself, but I could only imagine how difficult that must be for the party.
Yay!
Yay! Sorry, I don't know what happened.
I don't either. Everything was fine.
Thank you.
Yay! Well, at least we're connected again.
Okay, can you hear me good? Because there's some background music or noise.
No, I can hear you. That's great.
Okay. My apologies. I don't know what happened.
No, that's fine. I'm not sure either.
So let me find out where I am. Okay, share screen. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so there's an Indigenous Peoples Caucus that they hold here. They convene every morning at 9 o'clock, and they convene with all the Indigenous peoples of the world. So each region selects folks that they want to represent. And I guess it depends on what the year is, what the issue is, and what the convention's kind of focus was. So I remember at the first COP that we went to, we were really focused on the rights of Indigenous peoples and getting that included in a lot of the text, or at least being acknowledged in some of the official meetings. As we move forward since then, we're definitely not only looking at acknowledging the rights of Indigenous peoples, but having them implemented as well, because that's really important. And a lot of the big focus this year that I've noticed was what they're calling like traditional ecological knowledge. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, that term at all. It was fairly new to me within the last few years. Basically, it's just the indigenous knowledge that folks have carried for thousands of years and taking care of their own homelands and waters. And I think a lot of people are looking at how Indigenous peoples being at the forefront of climate change are also going to be at the forefront of solutions. I personally feel as though I wouldn't consider them solutions, more or less, because we've maintained the lands that we've lived on for thousands of years and survived. So with that, we went to the Indigenous Peoples Caucus, and as you can see, the lady in the red, she's the Madam Chair, and those are also members of the Indigenous Peoples Caucus this year. The gentleman to your left is named Chief Nanoa. He's from Brazil. He comes from a small tribe down there, and right now they're suffering from the impacts of drought. which is like a deforestation project that was also implemented a few years ago. So he's here speaking against that. Sorry, I had I had everything all together for once.
That's fine. It's working now.
Okay, so Chief Nanoa has serious concerns for his communities, and some of the stuff that he talked about on the panel the other day. So for some of the folks that might not know what RED is, it's in relationship to carbon trading, cap and trades. So his community is a part of the carbon trading, and he said that the first thing that happened when they came to his community and tried to propose some of these initiatives was the division in communities. And that we're the ones that were trying to protect our forests, and they were the ones that were offering money, and basically that they were just doing business. And they didn't care about the suffering of the people, just the profits. And I got a very amazing in-depth look into what RED means. And I was curious because last month in my own tribe, I saw that carbon trading was on an agenda for our tribal council. And knowing a few things that I do know about carbon trading, I became a little alarmed because I felt like they were trying to commodify our resources. So I started to look into it a little bit more about why that was on the agenda, who proposed it, why as a community we were looking at carbon trading, and some of the impacts of that, and if folks that were proposing it or even were accepting a proposal within our tribal government actually even really knew the implications or the process of carbon trading. And I was really excited to see Chief Nanoa here because it gives us a firsthand perspective of the impacts of that. So just because you're offsetting in one space doesn't mean that there's not impacts in another. So Chief Nanoa and his people are really suffering from that. And I also learned today, let me see, that, they're limiting access to their sacred sites on their land. So, and I couldn't understand why, right? Well, it was because the people that are using the carbon trading, they're going to say, oh, this tree in this specific spot is being used to help offset our emissions over here, with ConocoPhillips, for example. So that tree becomes really significant to that organization or company or whatever that it might be. And they're going to want to protect that tree. Therefore, if that tree is on land, indigenous land specifically, say it might be a sacred tree, or it doesn't even have to be a sacred tree, it just could be any tree. They don't want folks to disrupt that, because should anything become what they're calling it as risk management, so if it was becoming damaged or it wasn't of value anymore, or it didn't even exist, then it wouldn't be of use to the people that were trying to offset their carbon. So Chief Nanoa stated that none of this was explained to his community at all. They just said that they were just going to get money, they were going to get developed, that they were going to be helped. And he said they're still waiting for for those profits, that they've never received anything. And actually they've even, like he said, they've been cut off from a lot of their own land because it's of value to someone else now. And it's really a disheartening story to hear. And we were really grateful to have him here on our delegation. He really speaks from the heart. And here he was sharing with us a prayer and a song from his people. So transitioning from that maybe a little bit, all over they have like these really amazing photos of the Fiji people, because Fiji was supposed to be hosting this, and due to just infrastructure constraints, Bun is doing the hosting. So they have these really amazing photos all over of the people from Fiji and the Polynesians. I think I have another photo here. I wasn't sure if I could share a video, but they had some amazing women doing some beautiful dances here too. That was really awesome. So there's just some of the pics that they have. They're really, really beautiful and just eye-opening to the folks that are living in those areas. Oh, there's the women there. So they do these demonstrations all over, and I think they're really good to stop and share, because honestly, and I was having a conversation this morning, like some of this is really heavy stuff. When you realize what corporations and businesses and big money is doing to small communities, and I don't want to call them small people, because I come from a small people and I don't feel like we're small at all. I think we're really amazing, strong people, and our presence here definitely is necessary and needed, and hopefully even impactful. Okay, that's Senator Jerry Brown from California. And I just want to touch on that a little bit and continue the discussion about carbon trading, because it's really big in California right now. California is looking to kind of do this across the United States in the hopes that they're somewhat of a model. And Jerry Brown, the governor there, not senators, my apologies, the governor is kind of at the forefront of that initiative, and he really thinks it's a great idea. Which also brings up that within this entire movement, we'll call it, of climate justice, there's a lot of internal back and forth, and not everybody agrees on solutions, or not even everyone even agrees on what some of the issues or the problems are. So it creates a lot of internal turmoil for folks, and it's really hard to feel like some of us are progressing or some of us are quote unquote winning. But I know a lot of people are looking at looking at California in terms of being a leader for cap and trade in the United States, and also taking that global. Which brings me back to Bad River's agenda item, having carbon trading, because some of the folks I talked to that were involved were like, yeah, California's doing it, it's great. And I don't share that sentiment. And I'll definitely take everything that I've learned here, because there's a lot to learn here, both firsthand, and there's materials everywhere about carbon trading. This is one of the actions that was held. So on this past Monday, the White House had an event where they were announcing their energy plan, which included coal and oil. And in part of that, Sustain Us, which is also a national climate justice group, held an action where folks walked out of that meeting, and we then took the stage and created a huge platform on why these groups coming out of the US do not agree with that, and kind of taking a stance that we do not agree with it. And even though that the United States itself, coming from the White House, is making those statements, that there's a lot of folks that are against that. So just some more photos from the action. There's some stuff on the nuclear. I haven't really been too involved in some of the nuclear stuff. Just in general, to me, it's like, no. I don't really want to know too much anyways, because the bottom line is just no. Sometimes I took this picture because, so you see this side of the action, right? You see all the folks, you see all this, you see the banners, and then I feel like sometimes folks really don't get to see the other side of a camera, which looks a little something like that. And it can be chaotic. You do have to watch your personal body self. I have fallen on many actions if you're not careful. So it's definitely about sometimes a safety issue, but also just getting to see the other side of the camera. That's me taking a nap because I'm really jet lagged. No. Um, so it really is grassroots, and it's really, you know, people on the ground really putting in a lot of work. It is definitely a lot of work. People that come here work really hard and trying to make sure that their voice is heard and that a lot of the information that they're trying to portray is heard. So we just took over a space in one of the hallways, and they got to work on some of the banners. We'll also be working on banners tonight for one of our last actions in the morning, and hopefully I'll be able to post about that tomorrow. I think it'll be really impactful. And this was one of the actions as well in relationship to Indigenous folks, and it's really nice because we get to see so many different folks from all over the world, and we'll get to that part too. So some more of our actions there, as you can see, myself and Chief Nanoa and a lot of folks. It's really exciting to meet other folks from across the country and make those connections. This is one of their cool trains that you get to ride in. It's actually like a solar train, and up here is all solar panels on the roof of these little trains. It was cute, something different. I took this picture because I wasn't really sure if anybody knew what Germany's weather was like, but apparently their leaves change and they get snow, and it's winter here too. What I really like, and what they have some art spaces, like a lot of countries will get their own like pavilions. So there's like the United States pavilion. This one happens to be part of India's, and just some of the really amazing art that comes out of some of these spaces. Some more of the Fiji brothers and sisters. So yesterday was Indigenous Women's Day with the United Nations, and it was really important because I feel like some of these women that have been working in this capacity for a number of years worked really hard at being recognized and getting Indigenous women recognized, and it was really powerful to be asked to be a part of that ceremony and represent Indigenous women of North America. As you can see, there's a number of women here representing from Africa. Our sister here, this is one of our Sami sisters. I have another picture of our Latin American sister, the Arctic region. And what we did, we just lit candles in memory for the missing and murdered Indigenous women that are across the globe, because honestly, with the rise of extractive industry, the violence against women has also increased, and we're seeing that a lot even in the United States. For instance, with the man camps that are held in North Dakota. So we just had a ceremony where each woman from each region said a few words, either in their own language or spoke about the issues that are happening in their regions. Some of the really beautiful women there. This woman is Norwegian, and she approached me afterwards and said that the Norwegian women had worked really hard at getting Norway to divest in what is called the black snake, which was I thought was also cool because that phrase is global, and just shows that we're really connected, and you know there really is support and other people fighting with and for us too. That's me in a interpreter booth, because when I was 12, I wanted to be an interpreter for the UN. So I was really excited. This is our sister from Kenya, very strong voice. She talks about a lot of the issues that they're going through down there in terms of commodities and not being able to also access their lands and their traditions, because their traditions are also tied into their land. These are some of our Sami brothers and sisters. This is back to Chief Nanoa and some other folks that came from Brazil. It's just really, it can be really emotional, I think, when you hear the stories firsthand of the things that are happening. And like I said, 8 years ago when I came on my first COP trip, I couldn't make like a big connection, or at least I thought I couldn't, between my community and climate change and how we're affected or at the front lines. And it's only been 7 years, and that's changed. I can give you a number of examples of how we're affected or how we're impacted by it. For instance, last year we had what some have called a 100-year flood in my community. The water level rose over 40 feet and actually broke records and even broke a lot of the instruments that we used to measure like rainfall. So our community is actually cut off. A lot of our roads were washed out completely. And we were basically stuck on our own land within an island. The National Guard had to come get some of our community members and elders out that were sick. So they had to fly in and get some of our members out. And it took us 2 days to get power, and it took us 3 days even to get an infrastructure so that we could get through, because the river was overflowing, we couldn't pass it. So I think more and more of that's going to happen. And being here and learning how we're going to prepare for that and learning from others is going to be really vital. I saw this statue close to where I'm staying at, and I thought it was just really powerful and representative of what we're doing here. Just some of the streets, because it's nice to see. Back to Chief Nanoa. The lady sitting next to him is Heather Melton Lightning. She comes from Alberta territories. She works really hard with the tar sands up there. She's who I would like to call one of my mentor sisters, knows so much. She also works on the inside with the negotiations and helping get text and different wording in there. So that's what they're working on this year, is the traditional ecological knowledge. And we can get to that part in a second if we have time, because as great as it sounds, right? Like, oh yeah, they're including traditional ecological knowledge. That's amazing. They're finally listening to the Indigenous people. Well, they are, but they're not doing it for the benefit of the Indigenous people. They're basically taking our knowledge and, colonizing it, I guess you could say, for their own benefits. Learning how we do things and kind of taking it for that. This is Chief Nanoa with Tom Goldtooth. Tom Goldtooth, because we're talking about Minnesota being here in COP23. Tom Goldtooth is the executive director for the Indigenous Environmental Network that's based out of Bemidji, Minnesota. He's also who I'm working with here, and just wanted to give him a shout out because he's also very instrumental here with the delegation and talks, and so I've just been following him around for days and being his little sidekick and learning as much as I can, and it's really amazing. Us and Chief Nanoa, who left today back to his home. He sends his love. Okay, so this morning I happened to run into Payton. Payton comes from the East Coast, and it was really amazing because like 4 or 5 years ago, we were in a fellowship together. And it was called the Energy Action Coalition Fellowship, where we took about 10 different delegates from all across the country, and we spent a year together just focusing on different areas and issues. And he just happened to be in the cafeteria that we were sitting at, and he walked by and he was like really excited to see me. So it was really good to make those connections, because he fights more like inner city kind of stuff in terms of like pollution and industrial just kind of workings that are happening in his community, being taken over by industry within communities. And we visited his community from what I remember, and they had like this incinerator in their backyard. And when I say their backyard, it was like house, fence, incinerator. And it was just unbelievable. And he spoke of the amounts of cancer rates and the amounts of asthma and the sick babies and the miscarriages that were happening in his area. And it's just truly devastating. And when you're able to put those together on a personal, real level, it really kind of just shakes shakes your mind. I think this might be the last slide. So I just got done right before I logged on here with a water ceremony with one of my Mandan sisters, and it was really beautiful and powerful. We had a lot of participants. About 50 people came with us and shared that space with us. We prayed for the water, and we gave offerings to the water space here, and a lot of folks brought some water of their own to include in it. I think the water ceremonies, as they differ across Indigenous groups, differ, but they all have the same intent and message, in that water is sacred.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing what you've been up to, the things that you've seen, the people you've met. Honestly, your story is like such a great perspective for all of us to hear back here of the Indigenous communities and the people that are fighting for the people who don't have the power at the table. So it's so good to hear that that is happening, and learning new vocabulary like the what was it, traditional
ecological knowledge.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Well, that wraps up our webinar here with Aurora, who is in Germany and has a few more days to take the rest of the conference in. But you can tune in next Monday, or not next Monday, actually, November 27th, we're going to have a panel of a few of our delegates who have gone in person back at the University of Minnesota, or you can tune in virtually to that as well, just to talk about what it's like to come back. But to close out, Aurora, do you have kind of a hope that you want to bring back to Wisconsin and your community after attending COP23?
I have learned so much. And it's funny, because I always think like you don't know enough. That's kind of my motto, is that there's no possible way for one person to know it all. So it's really good to network and to talk with other people around you in your communities, any kind of networks or connections, and just to learn as much as you can, ask questions, and share that information, because it's really important.
Yeah, I agree. That's great. Great. Well, get some rest. See all the rest that you can while you're there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that it worked out for you to find another space. So thank you.
Thank you.